The containment field flickered once, then stabilized. Commander Thessa of the Vren Royal Guard stood motionless before the obsidian monolith that had defied every species in the known galaxy for 3,000 years. Her secondary arms rested on her pulse weapons while her primary hands interfaced with the diagnostic array. Every reading came back the same: impenetrable, unresponsive, dead. Not dead, waiting. Behind her, the human delegation shuffled in the antechamber. Protocol demanded she acknowledge their presence, but Protocol also demanded the ancient database remain sealed until proper authorization could be determined. Since no one in living memory possessed that authorization, the two protocols existed in permanent conflict. Commander. The voice belonged to Ambassador Chen, the human representative who'd spent 6 cycles petitioning for access. We've brought the linguistic team as requested. Setha's mandibles twitched. She hadn't requested anything. The Empress had ordered a final consultation before declaring the database a historical monument and nothing more. The difference mattered. Approach, Thessa said. 3 humans entered. 2 adults carrying scanning equipment. 1 child no more than 7 solar years clutching a datapad to her chest like armor. Tessa's inner eyelids blinked in sequence. You brought a juvenile to a restricted archaeological site. Sarah Chen is our lead xenolinguist, Ambassador Chen said, gesturing to one of the adults. Her daughter Maya has been helping with pattern recognition. The child has an unusual aptitude. Aptitude is sin-sufficient, Thessa began, but the database chose that moment to emit a low-frequency pulse that rattled the chamber's foundations. Everyone froze. The monolith had been silent for 1,700 years. Even the failed Catherine expedition that ended in 4 deaths had produced no response from the structure. Now it hummed with something that felt almost like anticipation. Nobody move, Thessa commanded, though the order was redundant. Her guard detail had already shifted into defensive positions, weapons trained on the database rather than the humans. Standard procedure for dealing with ancient technology: assume hostility until proven otherwise. The child took 3 steps forward. Maya, no! Dr. Chen lunged, but Tessa was faster. Her secondary hand caught the woman's wrist with precisely calibrated force. Enough to stop, not enough to injure. She may have triggered a response, Thessa said quietly. Interrupting now could be catastrophic. The girl stood before the monolith, head tilted, eyes scanning the surface. To Thessa's enhanced vision, the database appeared unchanged. Smooth black stone inscribed with symbols that shifted between languages, never settling, never repeating in any pattern the finest minds across 7 species could decipher. Maya hummed. It was barely audible, a simple melody that might have been a children's song from Earth. 3 notes ascending, 2 descending, a pause, then the sequence reversed. Nothing remarkable. The database blazed with white light. Thessa's combat protocols engaged automatically. She pulled Dr. Chen back, signaled her guards to establish a perimeter, calculated evacuation routes and acceptable casualty thresholds in the half-second before the light resolved into something coherent. Symbols. Not the shifting, incomprehensible glyphs that had decorated the monolith for millennia. New symbols, crisp and clear, arranged in vertical columns that descended from the apex of the structure to its base. It's responding, Ambassador Chen whispered. Emperor's mercy, it's actually responding. Silence, Thessa ordered. Her helmet's analytical suite was recording everything, transmitting directly to the Empress's command center. This moment would be analyzed by specialists far more qualified than her to interpret what had just occurred, but she was here now. She had to make the immediate call. Maya took another step closer, still humming her simple tune. The symbols pulsed in rhythm with her melody, brightening when she hit certain notes, dimming during others. A pattern was emerging, though Thessa couldn't identify its nature. Doctor, Thessa said, voice level, what is your daughter doing? Sarah Chen's face had gone pale, but her eyes were sharp with scientific focus. She's singing a Fibonacci sequence translated into musical notation. We've been testing mathematical patterns for weeks with no results. Maya suggested we try expressing them through sound instead of visual representation. Why would she suggest that? Because she's 8 and doesn't know what's impossible yet. Because she's 8 and doesn't know what's impossible yet. The database's hum deepened. Thessa felt it in her bones, in the structural supports of the chamber, in the ancient bedrock. This wasn't a simple activation sequence. This was recognition. Maya's humming grew more confident. She raised her small hand toward the monolith's surface, fingers splayed. Dr. Chen made a choked sound of protest, but Thessa held her back with quiet force. If the database intended harm, Thessa said, we would already be dead. The ancients were many things. Inefficient was not one of them. The child's palm touched the obsidian surface. Every light in the chamber died. Then the database spoke, and its voice was older than empires, deeper than oceans, and it spoke in a language that should have been impossible. It spoke in English. Access granted, the database said. Genetic marker confirmed. Cognitive pattern recognized. Welcome, humanity. We have been waiting. Tessa's tactical display showed 16 different alert protocols triggering simultaneously. The Empress's private channel opened in her helmet, but she muted it with a gesture her sovereign would later forgive or execute her for. This moment required her full attention. Maya stood with her hands still pressed against the monolith, eyes wide but unafraid. The database's surface had transformed from impenetrable stone to something resembling liquid crystal, rippling with light that cast the child's shadow across the entire chamber in fragmented, multiplied patterns. Maya Chen, the database continued, its voice resonating through the air itself rather than speakers. Age 8, standard years. Genetic descendant of the architect lineage, you are recognized, Dr. Frank. Sarah Chen finally broke free of Tessa's restraining grip, but instead of pulling her daughter away, she stopped 3 paces back, her scientist's instincts warring with maternal terror.
Architect lineage?
That's impossible. We've traced our family back 7 generations. We're educators and farmers, nothing more. All humans carry the potential, the database replied. The architects seeded their genetic markers across your entire population before the departure. A safeguard, a hope, a contingency against their own extinction. The architects were legend, the mysterious precursor race that had built the database and disappeared 5,000 years ago. Every species had theories. The Vryn believed they descended to a higher plane of existence. The Kethrin thought they destroyed themselves in civil war. The humans, youngest of the spacefaring races, had barely formed hypotheses before being overwhelmed with more immediate survival concerns. Why English? Thessa asked. Protocol demanded she control the situation, though control seemed increasingly theoretical. The architects predated human spaceflight by millennia. It is remembered. The database pulsed and new text appeared on its surface, scrolling too fast for Thessa to read, but slow enough for her helmet's recording systems to capture. The human genetic structure contains encrypted information within non-coding sequences. What you call junk DNA is compressed memory, waiting for the correct trigger to unfold. Maya finally spoke, her voice small but steady. My mom showed me patterns in old languages. We played games with them. She said everything has rhythm if you know where to look. Your mother remembers the old ways without knowing she remembers, the database said. This is the gift and burden of the architect lineage. You were summoned here, child. Not by chance, not by curiosity, by necessity. Thessa's secondary hands moved to her communication array, overriding the Empress's muted channel. This was beyond her authority to contain. Your Majesty, the situation requires immediate command-level assessment. The Empress's response came instantly, her voice carrying the weight of 300 years of rule. Commander Thessa, you will maintain position. The human delegation remains under your protection. Take no aggressive action unless the database demonstrates hostile intent. We are dispatching the full council and the Keeper of Ancient Records. Estimated arrival 14 minutes. An eternity in combat time, barely a breath in diplomatic terms. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, diplomatic training overriding his obvious fear. Database, you've waited 3,000 years for human contact. Why? What is the necessity you mention? The database's light dimmed slightly and Thessa's threat assessment protocols screamed warnings. That dimming wasn't a reduction in power, it was focus. Concentration. The gathering of resources for something significant. The architects left this galaxy when they detected the approach of the consuming dark, the database said. An intelligence from the void between galaxies. Not hostile in the way organic minds understand hostility. Simply incompatible with matter-based existence. It does not destroy. It converts. It is not evil. It is antithetical to the concept of life itself. The temperature in the chamber dropped 5 degrees. Tessa saw frost forming on the surface of her guard's armor. The architects fought for 7,000 years, the database continued. They lost entire star clusters, they evacuated 47 galaxies, they seeded younger races with the genetic tools needed to detect, resist, and eventually overcome the dark, but they ran out of time. So they ran, and they left guardians behind. Databases like myself. scattered across 10 million worlds, waiting for the inheritor races to mature sufficiently. Maya's hand trembled on the database's surface, but she didn't pull away. Is it coming here? The dark? It has already arrived, the database said, and Thessa felt her blood turn to ice. It entered this galaxy 1,700 years ago. It has been spreading slowly, converting star systems at the galactic rim. Your species calls the affected region the silent zones, places where colonies stop transmitting, where exploration vessels vanish, where nothing returns. Every spacefaring race knew them. 700 star systems gone dark over the past millennium. The Vryn Empire had declared them quarantined, assumed some virulent plague or failed terraforming experiment. The Catherine believed they were natural dead zones, regions where space-time had degraded. No one had suspected an intelligence. Why can humans resist? Dr. Chen asked, her voice shaking. We're the youngest race, the weakest. We have 19 colony worlds and barely functional FTL drives, because the architects built you to resist, the database said. Every human child is born with dormant abilities encoded in your genes, pattern recognition that transcends mathematics, intuitive understanding of dimensional mechanics, cognitive flexibility that allows you to comprehend concepts that drive other species mad. You were designed as weapons, not of war, of understanding. The dark cannot convert what it cannot comprehend, and you were made incomprehensible to it. Maya looked up at her mother, then at Tessa. That's why you brought me here. Mom said it was for pattern work, but you knew something was different about me. Dr. Chen knelt beside her daughter, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But I've always felt like there was something more to you, something I couldn't explain. I thought I was being a foolish parent, seeing genius in normal childhood curiosity. You are remembering, the database said gently. The architect genetic markers respond to environmental triggers, the presence of this database. The mathematical patterns you've been studying, the unconscious recognition of purpose, all of it has been awakening what sleeps in your daughter's DNA. Tessa's communication array lit up with urgent signals. The council was arriving ahead of schedule, emergency protocols overriding standard approach vectors. She could see their fleet on her tactical display, 12 warships surrounding the diplomatic vessel containing the Empress herself. This was no longer an archaeological curiosity. This was a potential shift in the galactic power structure. What happens now? Thessa asked, keeping her voice neutral. What does the database require? Offer. I contain the complete archives of the architect civilization, technology millennia beyond anything the current spacefaring races possess, weapons capable of holding the dark at bay, methods for awakening the latent abilities in all humans, and the coordinates of 673 other databases scattered across this galaxy, each containing specialized knowledge. Ambassador Chen's face shifted through a dozen expressions before settling on grim determination. In exchange for? Nothing, the database said. This is not a transaction. This is an inheritance. The architects built humanity for this purpose. The knowledge is yours by right of genetic legacy. I am simply the vault keeper, waiting for the key. Maya smiled, and it was the smile of a child who had just solved a puzzle she hadn't known she was working on. I'm the key. My son opened the lock. You are one key, the database agreed. There are 70 million others like you scattered across human space, children born in this generation with the genetic markers fully expressed. You are the first wave, the awakening. In 20 years, you will be the defenders. In 50, you will be the vanguard. In a century, you will push the consuming dark back beyond the galactic rim and seal it there. Thessa heard the Empress's ship entering final approach, felt the weight of history pivoting on this moment, understood that her role as protector had just expanded beyond anything she'd trained for. She stepped forward, placing herself between the database and the entrance where the Empress would emerge. Not in defiance. In solidarity. Then the Vryn Empire will assist, Thessa said formally. Not as conquerors. Not as rivals. As allies in a war we didn't know we were already fighting. The database pulsed with warm light. This is acceptable. This is optimal. This is what the architects hoped for when they designed their final failsafe. Unity born not of desperation, but of shared purpose. Maya's hand finally left the database's surface. The light dimmed but didn't fade entirely. A connection had been established. A door had been opened. And through it, humanity would walk into its inheritance, into its purpose, into the war that had been waiting for it since before their species had learned to make fire. The Empress entered the chamber, her full regalia radiating authority, but she stopped when she saw the child. Stopped and bowed, not deeply, but with unmistakable respect. "Show me," the Empress said simply. "Show me what we face. Show me how we fight." 3 hours later, the chamber had transformed into an impromptu war room. The Empress sat in conference with her full council, holographic displays showing the spread of the silent zones, predictive models of the consuming dark's advance, and most troubling, projections of when it would reach inhabited space. 18 months. Thessa stood at her post, watching the humans cluster around Maya as the database continued its patient explanation of genetic activation protocols. The child was exhausted, her small frame sagging against her mother, but her eyes remained alert, hungry for knowledge. Dr. Chen had pulled in the rest of the linguistic team, which had expanded to include xenobiologists, genetic engineers, and military strategists. The Vern Council had opened communications with the Kethrin hegemony and the Talvex communion. Within 6 hours, representatives from all major spacefaring races would arrive. The database had been clear. Humanity was the key, but the lock required every species working in concert. Commander. Lieutenant Vess approached, her third in command. "The perimeter is secured, but we're detecting unusual energy signatures in the outer chambers. The database appears to be activating additional sections. It's been dormant for centuries. Full activation will take time. There's something else." Vess hesitated, unusual for her disciplined second. "Reports from the fleet. 3 silent zone border systems just came back online, transmitting distress signals that are 1,700 years old." Tessa's mandibles went rigid. "Explain." "The database is broadcasting on frequencies we didn't know existed. It's reaching other databases, waking them simultaneously, and apparently that network is interfering with the Dark's conversion field, forcing it to retreat from contested areas. Not a weapon, a shield. The databases weren't just repositories of knowledge. They were active defense systems, dormant until the inheritor race was ready to claim them." The Empress's voice cut through the chamber's low hum of activity. "Commander Thessa, attend." Thessa crossed to the command cluster, noting that Maya had been seated at the table despite her age. The child held herself with remarkable composure, though her mother's hand remained on her shoulder. "The database has presented a proposal," the Empress said. "I require your tactical assessment before proceeding. A holographic display activated, showing a complex 3-dimensional structure." It took Thessa several seconds to recognize it as a modified FTL corridor, twisted through dimensions she couldn't quite comprehend. "This is a conduit," the Empress continued. "Architect technology. It can link all 673 databases into a unified network, creating a defensive barrier around inhabited space while humanity's genetic activation proceeds. Construction time: 3 standard years. Material requirements: extensive but achievable, with full multi-species cooperation." Thessa studied the schematic with her tactical overlay active. "Vulnerabilities? The conduit requires 70 million human children serving as biological interface nodes," the database answered. "Not permanently. Shifts of 6 hours per day until the network achieves self-sufficiency. Approximately 5 years total." Ambassador Chen spoke carefully. "You're asking us to put every child with active genetic markers into a defense network. For 5 years, while they're still developing." "I am showing you the optimal path to survival," the database corrected. "There are alternatives. Slower methods. Less efficient. With higher casualty projections across all species." "What are the casualty projections for the conduit path?" Tessa asked. 0.03% for human children in the interface network, 17% for military forces holding the border zones during construction, 34% for civilian populations in the outermost colonies if we fail to complete the conduit before the Dark reaches inhabited sectors. And, without the conduit, 97% extinction rate for all organic life in this galaxy within 2 centuries. You're certain of these numbers? I have modeled 7 billion potential scenarios using data from the Architect's previous encounters with the Dark. These projections hold across 90% of variables. Tessa saw the weight settle on the Empress's shoulders, saw the same weight mirror across every council member's face. This was the burden of command in its purest form, choosing between terrible options and worse ones. Maya raised her hand like a child in a classroom.
The Empress noticed, and something in her ancient face softened. "Yes, young one?"
The other children like me," Maya said quietly.
"Can we talk to each other through the database? If properly interfaced, yes." Let us decide if we want to help. Ambassador Chen started to object, but Maya spoke over him gently. Dad, we're the ones who'll do it. We should get to choose. The database pulsed with what Thessa could have sworn was approval. The child demonstrates wisdom. The architect specifically encoded free will into human genetic architecture. Coercion defeats the purpose of the failsafe. The children must choose. The Empress looked at Thessa. Commander, you've spent decades evaluating threats and responses. What is your assessment of this proposal? Your Majesty, I am a soldier. I understand sacrifice in service of survival. But I also understand that some choices change us fundamentally. If we ask these children to shoulder this burden, we must ensure they do so with full knowledge and consent. And we must be willing to accept their refusal if that is their choice, even if refusal leads to extinction? Even then? Because a civilization that enslaves its children to survive has already lost what makes it worth preserving. The Empress closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. Database, establish communication protocols with all identified human children carrying active genetic markers. Give them 70 to 2 hours to consult with their families and communities. We will reconvene when their decision is known. This is acceptable, the database said. Maya slumped in her chair, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Dr. Chen scooped her up, and Thessa was struck by the contrast between the child's cosmic significance and her fundamental vulnerability. She was still just a small girl who needed her mother. As the Empress dismissed the council, Thessa remained behind, studying the schematics of the conduit. 3 years of construction, 5 years of active operation, 8 years total to save a galaxy. She'd fought in wars that lasted longer and achieved far less. Commander, the database said, its voice modulated to a private frequency only Thessa's helmet could detect. You doubt the children will agree. I doubt anyone should have to make such a choice, Thessa replied. And yet they will, because humans are optimized not just for resistance to the dark, but for hope in the face of impossible odds. The architects bred them for it. Selected for it across 10,000 generations before even activating the genetic markers. Hope is their most dangerous weapon. Thessa looked at Maya, already asleep in her mother's arms. And their greatest vulnerability. All weapons are double-edged, the database agreed. But the architects trusted them with this burden. Perhaps we should do the same. Over the next 72 hours, the galaxy held its breath. The database network had reached every human child with active genetic markers. 70 million conversations happened simultaneously across 19 colony worlds and 47 space stations. Parents struggled to explain concepts they barely understood themselves. Children asked questions that had no easy answers. Thessa observed it all through intelligence reports, each one a small window into individual families facing cosmic stakes. On Harmony Station, a 9-year-old boy named Marcus organized his peers into a debate club, methodically working through the ethical implications. On New Edinburgh, twin sisters named Amara and Zara created a virtual support network for children whose parents were struggling with the decision. On the agricultural colony of Verdant, a 6-year-old girl named Lily asked if the pretty lights she'd been seeing in her dreams were the databases talking to her. They were. And on Earth itself, in the rebuilt cities and the wild places, children looked up at stars that suddenly seemed both more beautiful and more fragile. The Vrian Empire mobilized its construction fleets. The Kethran Hegemony opened their material reserves. The Talvex Communion provided dimensional engineering expertise. Species that had competed for resources and territory for centuries found themselves working toward a common goal with unprecedented cooperation. But everything still depended on the children's choice. Thessa stood in the database chamber when the deadline arrived. The Empress was present, along with her full council. Representatives from every major species, and Maya, looking both tiny and impossibly significant at the center of it all. The voting is complete, the database announced. Of 70 million human children with active genetic markers, 69,900,000 voted to participate in the conduit network. The chamber erupted in relieved celebration, but Thessa noticed what others missed. What about the remaining 100,000? She asked quietly. They voted no, the database said. Their choice is respected. The network will function at $90 and 980% efficiency with the reduced numbers. Casualties increase by 0.001% across all categories. This remains well within acceptable parameters. Maya stood, her small voice cutting through the celebration. What happens to the kids who said no? Do they still get to be special? Do they still have the powers? Their genetic markers remain active, the database confirmed. They simply choose not to serve in the conduit network. Some will contribute in other ways. Some will live ordinary lives. All deserve respect for their decision. Good, Maya said firmly, because forcing someone isn't saving them. It's just slower dying. Thessa felt something shift in her perception of this small human. She'd been focused on Maya's role as the key, the catalyst. She'd missed that the child was also a person, capable of moral reasoning that put hardened warriors to shame. The Empress approached Maya, lowering herself to meet the child's eyes. You understand what you've agreed to? 6 hours each day for 5 years, linked to a network beyond normal comprehension. There will be discomfort. Possibly pain. Certainly sacrifice.
I understand, Maya said.
But I also understand that my mom and dad didn't get a choice about the world they were born into. None of us do. We just get to choose what we do about it. Wisdom, the Empress murmured. She stood, addressing the assembled representatives. Then we begin construction immediately. The first conduit node will be established here, at this database. Subsequent nodes will follow according to the database's specifications. Humanity provides the interface. The Vryn provides structural engineering. The Kethrin provide materials. The Talvex provide dimensional stabilization. Every species contributes according to their strengths. She paused, letting her words settle. And we all remember that we do this not to survive as individual races, but to preserve life itself. The dark may be incompatible with our existence, but we are compatible with each other. That is our advantage. Thessa activated her communication array, transmitting orders to her fleet. All units transition to Protocol Architect. Construction timeline begins now. The database brightened, its light filling the chamber with warmth. The conduit network is initializing. First interface will occur in 3 days, allowing time for medical preparation of human participants. Estimated time to full network activation, 3.2 standard years. Maya looked at her mother. Will you be there? When I plug in. Every moment, I promise. As the assembled leaders began coordinating logistics, Thessa moved to the chamber's edge, watching the activity with a tactical eye. 3 years of construction. 5 years of operation. 8 years total to build a defense against something those species didn't even believe existed 72 hours ago. It should have been impossible. But she'd watched a child open a lock that had defeated the galaxy's finest minds for 3 millennia, had watched 70 million children vote to shoulder a burden that would have broken most adults. Perhaps impossible was simply a failure of imagination, Commander Thessa. Ambassador Chen approached, his expression carefully neutral. I wanted to thank you personally. For protecting Maya during that first contact, for advocating for the children's choice. I did my duty, Thessa replied. You did more than that. You recognized her personhood, even when she was being defined by her utility. That matters. Thessa's mandibles twitched in acknowledgement. Your species is teaching the galaxy uncomfortable lessons about the value of individual choice versus collective need. My daughter is 8. She should be playing with friends and learning math and complaining about bedtime. Instead, she's a critical component in a galactic defense network. She is still all those things, Thessa said. The tragedy would be if we forgot that in our focus on what she can do for us. Chen smiled sadly. We'll make sure none of the 70 million are reduced to just their function, their children first. Always. The database chamber had been expanded, transformed into a medical facility equipped with every precaution 7 species could devise. Maya lay on a specialized couch, neural sensors attached to her temples, her small hand wrapped around her mother's larger one. Tessa stood at the perimeter with her full security detail. The Empress observed from a raised platform, her face unreadable. Specialists from every major race monitored the readings, ready to abort at the first sign of distress. Beginning interface, the database announced. Maya Chen, do you consent to proceed? I do, Maya said, her voice steady. Connection established. For 3 seconds, nothing visible happened. Then Maya's eyes unfocused, her breathing pattern changed, and every monitor in the chamber spiked simultaneously. Her neural activity is off the scale, a Vryn medical specialist reported. But it's not chaotic. It's organized. Structured. Like nothing I've ever seen. She's accessing the database directly, Dr. Chen whispered. She's inside its architecture. Thessa watched the child's vital signs, ready to order disconnection if anything indicated harm. But Maya's heartbeat remained steady. Her brain activity was intense but stable, and slowly, impossibly, she began to smile. I can see it, Maya murmured. The network. All the other databases. They're singing to each other. Math and light and music, all at once. "Can you communicate with them?" the database asked. "I am communicating. Just by being here. I understand now. I'm not controlling anything. I'm just part of the pattern." A note in the song. "The conduit requires consciousness but not command. You provide the organic flexibility that allows the network to adapt to the dark strategies. The databases provide the processing power and ancient knowledge. Together, you become something neither could achieve alone." Maya's smile widened. "Can I talk to the other kids?" "When they interface, yes. You will sense each other as harmonics in the greater pattern." "Good," Maya said. "Because doing this alone would be scary. But if we're all doing it together, it's just hard." "Hard is okay." When it ended, Maya was exhausted but unhurt. Over the following weeks, other children began their interfaces. The network grew, node by node, child by child, database by database, and at the galactic rim, the consuming dark retreated 3 light years. It was barely a victory, barely even noticeable on the strategic scale, but it was movement in the right direction, and that was enough to fuel hope. 3 years became a blur of construction and adaptation. The conduit network grew like crystalline branches spreading across the galaxy, each node a fusion of ancient technology and young human consciousness. Tessa watched it all from her position as security coordinator for the Architect Project, a role that had evolved far beyond her original mandate. She'd become something between bodyguard, strategist, and advocate for the 70 million children at the network's heart. Maya was 11 now, taller and more serious than the child who'd first hummed a Fibonacci sequence at an impossible lock. She spent 6 hours daily in interface, emerging each time with knowledge that made scientists scramble to take notes. The database had been feeding humanity's technical understanding through the children, accelerating development across every field. FTL drives improved by 40% efficiency. Medical technology leaped forward a century. Agricultural yields tripled using techniques the architects had perfected on 10,000 worlds. But the price was visible in the children's eyes. They were still young, still playful and curious and occasionally petulant, but they carried an awareness of cosmic stakes that aged them in ways chronology couldn't measure. Thessa found Maya in the recreation sector, playing a modified version of chess with 3 other interface children. The game had evolved beyond traditional rules, incorporating dimensional thinking they'd learned through the network.
Commander Thessa!
A boy named Kieran waved her over. "Look, we can make the pieces move through temporal probability fields now." "Impressive," Thessa said, studying the board. She couldn't follow the actual game, but she recognized the joy in their faces. "Who's winning?" "Everyone," Maya said. "We figured out that competition is less interesting than collaborative problem-solving. So we changed the rules." "Very human," Thessa observed. "Very architect," Maya corrected gently. "They played games like this. We can feel their memories sometimes, through the databases. They weren't so different from us. They just had more time to figure things out." Kieran moved a piece through what appeared to be 4 dimensions simultaneously, except they ran when the dark came. "We're not running. They ran to give us time to prepare," Maya said firmly. "That's different." "That's sacrifice." The conversation was interrupted by alarms. Tessa's tactical display lit up with emergency markers. "All interface children to safe zones. Now." The children moved without panic, trained through hundreds of drills. Thessa escorted them personally, while her security teams locked down the facility. "Report," she demanded through her command channel. "Incursion at the outer perimeter," Lieutenant Vess responded. "Something breached the defensive grid. Not the dark itself, but something related. I'm transmitting visuals." The image that appeared on Thessa's display made her blood freeze. It was a ship. Or it had been a ship. Now it was something else, its hull transformed into a geometry that hurt to perceive. "Not destroyed. Converted. That's the explorer's hope," Thessa whispered. "A Kethrin survey vessel that went missing in the Silent Zone 6 months ago. It's broadcasting on all frequencies," Vess reported. "The same message, repeated continuously." "Let me hear it." "Not quite Kethrin anymore. Not quite anything organic. Turn back. Turn back. Turn back. The song is ending. The silence is mercy. Turn back." Maya's voice came from behind Thessa, though she should have been in the safe zone. "It's wrong. The database says that's not what the dark sounds like. That's what fear sounds like." "You should be secured," Thessa began, but Maya shook her head. "Let me interface. Right now, I can ask the network what this is. We don't know if it's an attack or... Commander, The Empress's voice cut through the channel. "Allow the interface. We need information more than we need excessive caution." Thessa wanted to argue, but discipline overrode instinct. "Secure interface chamber. Priority 1 medical team standing by." 3 minutes later, Maya was connected, her eyes unfocused, then snapped back with an intensity Thessa had never seen before. "It's bait," Maya said. "The Dark learned to study us. It converted that ship and its crew, but instead of full conversion, it left them partially aware, partially themselves. So they transmit fear so other ships would hear and spread panic. Psychological warfare," Thessa said. "The Dark is adapting. It's not stupid. It's just alien. And now it's learning from us." Maya's hands trembled. "The network is analyzing the conversion pattern. We think we can reverse it. Save the crew." "How certain?" 63%. "Terrible odds for a rescue operation, but better than nothing." "What do you need?" Tessa asked. "Permission to use the conduit offensively for the first time. We can project a counter-resonance field, interfere with the Dark's conversion process, but it will alert it to our capabilities, make it adapt faster." The crew of Explorers Hope volunteered for exploration knowing the risks, but we do not abandon those who can be saved. Proceed. Maya closed her eyes, and across 70 million children interfacing simultaneously, the conduit network sang a new song. Tessa watched through her tactical display as energy patterns invisible to conventional sensors pulsed from the database network toward the converted ship. The vessel shuddered, its impossible geometry flickering between alien transformation and original structure. Then, impossibly, it began to revert. Hull plating flowed back into familiar configurations. The sick geometry resolved into standard Kethrin engineering, and on the bridge, 7 crew members collapsed in their chairs, unconscious but alive. "Still themselves." "Recovery successful," Maya reported, her voice exhausted. "But the Dark knows now. It knows we can fight back." The Empress's channel crackled with urgency. "All systems, defensive posture. The conduit network remains our priority, but we must assume accelerated aggression from the Dark." Over the following months, the Dark's advance shifted from methodical consumption to active probing. Converted ships appeared at the edges of inhabited space, testing the conduit network's range and response time. Entire star systems flickered between normal space and sick transformation as both sides tested their capabilities. The galaxy had entered open war with an enemy that didn't understand the concept of war. That simply existed in a way fundamentally incompatible with life. Tessa found herself coordinating defensive operations across 47 systems simultaneously, her tactical expertise pushed to limits she hadn't known existed. The children of the conduit network worked in shifts. 6 hours on, 18 off, maintaining the defensive barrier while humanity's adult population scrambled to build conventional military forces. Because the conduit could defend. Could even reverse conversion within certain parameters, but it couldn't attack. Couldn't push the Dark back beyond the galactic rim. For that, they needed something else. Maya was 12 when she proposed the solution. Thessa was reviewing casualty reports. 3 colonies evacuated, 2 outposts lost to conversion before the conduit could respond, when Maya entered her office without announcement. "You should be resting," Thessa said, noting the dark circles under the girl's eyes. "I will. After. But I need to tell you something the network figured out." "Speak." "The architects didn't just give us defense," Maya said. "They gave us offense, too. It's in our DNA, dormant like everything else. We can be weapons. Real weapons, not just shields." "Explain." "The Dark converts matter by imposing its pattern onto ours. But we can reverse that, not just defensively, but actively. We can convert it back, make it into something compatible with life again." Thessa felt cold certainty settle in her chest. At what cost? The children doing it would need to interface deeper. Longer? We estimate 14-hour shifts instead of 6 for 3 years of offensive campaigns. Casualties increased to 3.7%. But we could push it back, drive it from the galaxy entirely. "You're asking children to become soldiers. We already are soldiers," Maya said quietly. "We just haven't been fighting offensively. This would be the same thing we're doing now, just more." Thessa stood, pacing her office with controlled aggression. "You're 12 years old. You should be studying literature and playing games and discovering who you want to become. Instead, you're proposing to extend your service and risk your life for a war the previous generation dumped in your lap." "Yes," Maya said simply. "Because I'm 12, but I'm also the child of architects who planned for exactly this situation. and I've interfaced with the network long enough to understand what's at stake. Retreating into childhood won't make the dark go away. Have you proposed this to the other children? We vote tomorrow. The network lets us communicate faster than normal channels. Preliminary consensus is 68% in favor. Thessa wanted to argue, wanted to find some alternative that didn't involve children fighting even harder than they already were. But tactical reality was merciless. They were losing the defensive war. Slowly, incrementally, but losing. If the children vote yes, Thessa said carefully, the Empress and her council will need to approve, as will the governing bodies of every species in the coalition. That's why I'm telling you first. You're the one who'll have to coordinate the military aspects, and you're the one who'll make sure they still treat us like people, not just weapon systems. The weight of that trust hit Thessa harder than any combat situation she'd faced. I will do everything in my power to protect your personhood, even while facilitating your use in combat. That paradox will haunt me. The moment it stops bothering you is the moment we've lost something important. The vote passed with 71% approval. The Empress and Council spent 6 days in emergency session before agreeing to the offensive campaign. Representatives from 19 human colonies submitted formal protests. 3 resigned in disgust at what they called weaponizing childhood. Agreed with them, even. But she also understood that the alternative was extinction, and the dead have no ethics to debate. The offensive began on Maya's 13th birthday. 70 million children interfaced simultaneously, their consciousness merging with the conduit network at depths never before attempted. The database provided the ancient knowledge. The children provided the flexibility, the adaptability, the fundamental incomprehensibility to the dark that made them effective weapons. And together, they pushed back. Star systems that had been dark for decades flickered back into normal space. Converted matter resolved into stable atoms. The dark retreated, not fleeing but being actively driven out, its incomprehensible pattern disrupted by something equally incomprehensible to it. The cost was immediate and visible. Children emerged from 14-hour shifts pale and shaking. Some had nosebleeds, others developed tremors. Medical teams worked around the clock managing symptoms that had no precedent in any species' medical literature, and every 72 hours the statistics updated. 3.7% casualty rate holding steady. 260,000 children experiencing various complications, 4,000 requiring extended medical care. 138 dead. Thessa stood at Maya's bedside in the medical wing, watching the girl sleep fitfully after her shift. Burns marked her temples where the neural interface had overtaxed her biology. Her vital signs fluctuated in patterns that terrified the doctors. But she was alive, still fighting, still herself. She asked for you to wake her when you arrived, Dr. Chen said quietly from the doorway. Said she needed to tell you something. Let her rest. She'll be angry if I do. The girl's eyes opened immediately, too alert for someone who should have been unconscious. We're winning, Maya said hoarsely. Pushed the dark back 700 light-years this month, but it's adapting faster than our projections. We need to accelerate the campaign. You're already past sustainable limits. There are no sustainable limits in war, Commander. Just acceptable losses versus unacceptable ones. Don't, Thessa said sharply, don't reduce yourself to statistics. You're a person, not a weapon system's efficiency rating. I'm both. That's what the architects made us. Human enough to defy the Dark's comprehension, tool enough to be deployed strategically. We exist in the paradox. I hate this, Thessa admitted. I've spent my life in military service. I understand sacrifice. But watching children burn themselves out for a war they didn't start. No one starts the wars that matter most, Maya interrupted. They inherit them. What matters is how we fight, and we're fighting together. All 70 million of us, choosing every day to keep going. That choice matters more than the circumstances that force it. Tessa had no response. What could she say to wisdom that had been encoded in genes by a vanished civilization, awakened in a child's mind through necessity? The offensive campaign continued for 3 brutal years. The Dark retreated, slowly at first, then faster as the conduit network refined its counter-conversion techniques. Star systems returned to life. Colonies thought lost were recovered. The silent zone shrank from 700 systems to 300 to 70 to 12. The children grew older. Maya turned 16, Kieran 15, Amara and Zara 14. They should have been studying for exams and experiencing first romances and arguing with their parents about normal teenage concerns. Instead, they were veterans of a war against an incomprehensible enemy, carrying scars both physical and psychological that would mark them forever. The casualty statistics rose: 6.1%, 10.3%, 14.8%. 10 million children injured in various degrees. 2,847 dead. Thessa attended every funeral she could, stood at attention while grieving parents buried children who had given everything to save species they'd never met, watched the Empress herself lay flowers at memorial walls inscribed with names that should have been laughing in schools, not carved in stone. And still the children voted to continue, because they could see, through the network, the databases, the ancient archives of the architects, exactly what would happen if they stopped. They knew the stakes, with a clarity no adults could match. Tessa hated that clarity, hated the burden it placed on young shoulders, but she couldn't deny its reality. The final offensive began when Maya was 17. Intelligence from the Conduit Network had located the Dark's primary concentration, the source point where it had first entered the galaxy, a region of space where normal physics degraded into nightmare geometry, where matter itself existed in states that defied comprehension. "We can seal it," Maya explained to the assembled council, her voice carrying the weight of 5 years' combat experience. "Create a barrier the Dark can't penetrate, but it requires every interface child committing simultaneously. 24 hours of continuous connection. No breaks, no rotation." "You're describing a suicide mission," Ambassador Chen said flatly. "I'm describing victory," Maya corrected. "Projected casualties 42% of interface children, but success rate 99.3%. The Dark will be sealed beyond the galactic rim permanently." The chamber erupted in argument, voices demanding alternatives, questioning the projections, refusing to accept such losses. Maya waited for silence, then spoke with quiet intensity. "We've spent 5 years fighting this war, lost 3,000 friends and siblings. Every one of us has scars. Every one of us has nightmares. And we're telling you, as clearly as we can, this is how we end it. This is how we make it mean something." The Empress's voice cut through the din. "You're asking me to send 30 million children to their deaths." "No, Your Majesty," Maya said. "We're telling you that 30 million children have already voted to end this war, whatever the cost. You're just being asked to acknowledge our choice. Wanted to find some strategic alternative that didn't require such sacrifice." But she'd spent 5 years searching for exactly that, and every model came back to the same conclusion. The operation launched 3 days later. 70 million children interfaced simultaneously across the galaxy. The Conduit Network blazed with power that made stars dim in comparison. And at the galactic rim, reality itself began to seal. Tessa monitored from the command center, watching vital signs for children she'd protected for years. Watched those signs fluctuate wildly as the strain exceeded anything previously attempted. Watched some of them flatline. Watched Maya's signals spike to levels that should have been lethal, then stabilize at impossible highs. For 24 hours, the galaxy held its breath. Then the Conduit Network completed its work, and 70 million children disconnected simultaneously. 30 million woke up, 39 million didn't. The medical teams moved with practiced efficiency, separating the living from the dead, treating the injured, recording the statistics that would define this generation. Tessa found Maya in recovery, unconscious but alive. Burns covered 60% of her body. Her neural patterns had been permanently altered by the deep interface. She would never be entirely normal again, but she'd survived. Dr. Chen sat beside her daughter's bed, holding a hand that didn't respond. "Was it worth it?" she asked Thessa. 39 million children dead. For what? For every child born after today who won't have to fight this war? Tessa said quietly. For every species that will continue to exist. For the choice to have a future at all. Easy to say when you didn't lose your child. I lost 39 million children I'd sworn to protect, Thessa countered. Their names are branded into my memory. Every one. She was different. Slower to respond, struggling with motor control, her brilliant mind now operating through neural pathways damaged beyond full repair. But she was aware, conscious, herself. Did we win? She asked Thessa during her first coherent conversation. You won, Thessa confirmed. The dark is sealed. The galaxy is safe. Good. Maya closed her eyes, exhausted by even brief conversation. Tell the others, tell them it mattered. I will tell them every day for the rest of my life. The Empress declared a new calendar, year 1 of the Architect era, marking humanity's fulfillment of their genetic purpose. Monuments rose on 1,000 worlds, carved with the names of the 39 million who didn't return. Schools taught their story with reverence and sorrow. The conduit network remained operational, maintained by the 31 million survivors, but its purpose had changed. No longer a weapon against the dark, it became a communication system, a repository of knowledge, a connection between species that had learned to fight together. Thessa retired from active military service at the age of 342, the oldest serving member of the Vrin Royal Guard. She spent her remaining years advocating for the surviving interface children, ensuring they received medical care, psychological support, and most importantly, recognition as individuals who had made a choice rather than tools that had been used. Maya never fully recovered. She lived with assistance for the rest of her life, her damaged neural pathways unable to support complete independence. But she studied, taught, wrote memoirs that became required reading across 7 species. And when she died at the age of 73, the galaxy mourned, because she hadn't just been a key that opened an ancient lock. She'd been a child who chose to shoulder an impossible burden. She'd been human in all the terrible beauty that implied. And she, along with 70 million others, had saved everything. Thessa attended the funeral, ancient even by Vrine standards, her body failing but her memory sharp. She stood at attention as they lowered Maya's body into the ground beside the memorial for the 39 million lost. "We remember," Thessa said, her voice carrying across the assembled mourners. Not just what they did, but who they were. Children first. Always children first. Who chose to be heroes when the galaxy needed them? The Empress, now in her 500th year of rule, placed flowers on Maya's grave. They taught us that strength isn't found in weapons or numbers. It's found in choice. In sacrifice freely given. In hope maintained against impossible odds. She turned to address the crowd, millions watching across dozens of worlds. "Let this be our commitment to every generation that follows. We will never again ask children to fight our wars. We will build a future worthy of their sacrifice. And we will never forget the song that opened the lock and saved us all." The memorial stood for 10,000 years, long after the Vrin Empire had evolved beyond physical form, long after humanity had spread to 1,000,000 worlds, long after the species that had fought together had merged into something new. The memorial stood and the names remained, and the story was told, of an 8-year-old girl who hummed a mathematical sequence, of 70 million children who chose to save a galaxy, of the price paid when the universe demands heroes from those too young to understand what heroism costs, and of the victory purchased with childhood itself, burned as fuel for survival, precious and irreplaceable and freely given. Because some songs once sung echo forever,